Hi everyone, this is my Jaju, aka my grandpa, Casimir Brodak, and we are going to do a little interview. So, when and where were you born in Poland?
I was born on February 27, 1937, in a colony or a small village named Szwajcaria, which was near a big town called Lwów, which is the main town. But nearby was a town called Tarnopol or Podhajce, Kozowa. That's around where I was born. It was a small village, probably 10 to 20 homes, that's about it. And back in 1944, during the war between Germany and Russia, we were in that location or the zone that I was in. The Germans came and said, "You have to move out of here because we will have a big fight." So they told us, grab whatever you have, and we grabbed all our belongings, whatever we could, put them on a wagon, horse-drawn, and took us to the railroad station. And they gathered people from around all the other villages and put us on the cattle train, stuck us all in there, as many as they could, and shoved the door and locked us in it. We were in those cattle trains probably somewhere around 48 hours, if not more. Some people were screaming, yelling. There was some very unpleasant drive, and we ended up in a town called Przemyśl, which is, at that time, they had a small concentration camp. They put us in there. Of course, first thing they did is give us those, shaved our heads, give us those striped uniforms, and they were going to starve us over there, getting us ready for the furnace. In the meantime, the war was getting towards the end, and as the war was getting towards the end, Hitler grabbed the last person from the farm into the army so they could win the war, but it didn't work, I guess. So anyways, they went into the concentration camps and took all the farmers that were farmers, and this is how we got saved. My dad was a farmer. They put us on this big farm in Bavaria near Munich, Germany. We were in this big farm, and as soon as we got to the farm, they brought us over there. That's my mother and father. I had two sisters and a young brother. I'm the second oldest. So anyways, they give us this, it was a large chicken coop. And they said, that's where you're going to live. It was a big, huge chicken coop. My parents cleaned it all out, and that's where we spend our nights. During the day, the parents both worked from sunset to sundown, milking cows, taking care of horses, doing whatever is needed on the farm. What helped us over there on this farm is when they dispersed all the chickens, they of course went into the barns and nested here and there. We could get eggs. We could also get some potatoes, steal apples from the trees, whatever was available to eat. Of course, even going under a cow and squeeze the little tit and get some milk, warm milk from the cow. That's how we ate, and it was very, very long and kind of sad situation. Well, the war was getting towards the end, and the front came by us. French people came by us first. The French liberated us, but somehow, as the French liberated, the line moved back, and the French disappeared, and then the Americans came. Then we were looking for the Russian people, but we never seen them again. I guess they must have squealed to the authorities, and they got rid of them. From then on, when the American came, they took us into camp, which was not too far from the farm, because I know during the war when the bombs were coming, we could see flames flying and stuff like that. So they took us to this town called Kempten. It's also in Bavaria. And here in Kempten, it was like a big concern made out of brick, and it was like 3-story high, and it was for military, but they put all the refugees. It wasn't only the Poles, but there were some other from other nations in that camp. Of course, in the camp, they started to organize. They were starting to force people to go back to Poland, as many as they could. So they loaded trains and trains, and we were lucky the locomotive could not pull all the trains, so ours got like maybe 2 or 3 in front, got unlocked, and then after that, my dad says he doesn't want to go back to Poland. He would like to immigrate to Argentina if he could, because he loved horses. Well, in this camp also there was a lot of refugees. There were political refugees, there were learned people, teachers, priests, religious guys, etc. They started to organize schools, they started to organize churches and little things, little vacations and stuff like that. And I made my first Holy Communion there in 1945. At that camp we stayed couple years, I think, and then we moved to another camp because it got smaller, so they transferred us. So we moved to a camp called Altenstadt. Altenstadt is, it was again barracks, but these barracks were like rooms. At the end of the barrack, they had facilities and they had recreation and stuff like that. And in that camp, in 1948, March 18 to be exact, my dad passed away. My dad was buried there. As a matter of fact, his buddies had to make a coffin out of the scraps that they found in the camp and carried them on the shoulders and buried them there in Germany. So after that, we were a widow with 6 children. They opened up to go to America, they opened up to Argentina, they opened up to Australia. We had a chance to go to Australia, but couldn't pass the consulate. He looked and he says, we have enough, look at the widow with 6 kids, we have enough on welfare. So we knew a priest, and he was kind of took to liking us and felt sorry, I guess, for my mom. He found a sponsor in Detroit. That's how we got to be a sponsor to Detroit. They were probably one of the last to immigrate. Otherwise, we would have probably have to stay in Germany. So we got to here to come to America was another trip. We had to go through, physical and political, etc. And when the American consular looked at my ma and then looked at the 3 boys, he says future draftees. I think that I'm just guessing. So we came to America on a troop carrier, merchant marine troop carrier. The name of the ship was General Greely, I believe. It was a green steel ship that brought troops to Europe and refugees to United States. We were leaving in November. In November, December, the ocean is very, very rough. I think it took us anywhere from 9 to 11 or some days on the ship. And on the ship, we had we couldn't come from Bremen. We had to go to Bremerhaven because the water was shallow in Bremen. We came across the Atlantic on that ship, and of course, on the ship, they separated the boys from their parents, from their mothers. I was 14, so I had to go with the men, single little guy myself. And on the ship, I had all the permissions, or all the different cards from my sisters and my mom, and I could go over there and pick up oranges or pick up whatever was picked up by hand, and I put in my pocket and sneaked it over to them. And of course, they gave us some nickels so we could buy Coca-Cola for a nickel. So I took some, and that's what they survived on for all that trip. They were turning blue from the rocking of the ship. When we ended up in New York, Ellis Island, we had to go again through the authorities, and some people were turned away, crying and screaming, but they took us and put us on a train in New York, and we came to Detroit. Detroit, they picked us up at the railroad station. A lady came in a station wagon, one of those, I forget, Willis or whatever it was them Woodies, one of them Woodies. And they brought us on Canfield and St. Alban to St. Alberta School. It was called the Displaced Person Shelter. The upstairs, there was no longer occupied by students, so they had classes, and across the street was the Felician Academy. That's where we used to go to eat with novices over there and every teachers, etc. We stayed in that place for 6 months. Nobody would give us rent. As a matter of fact, the guy that signed for our papers, we went to his house and tried to thank him. He shut the door in front of our face. He didn't want to be known that he did this. But anyways, to make the story short, we kept, eventually we got rent. I went to school at St. Alberta's. Because I came in December, so they tried to put me in the 8th grade, but I didn't speak any English, so they put me in 7A. And then next year, 7A, then 8th grade, I finished 8th grade. And in the meantime, I wanted to go to Wilbur Wright in the worst way. I wanted to be a tool and die maker. So I finished St. Alberta's, went 1 year to St. Joseph's, and I finally ended up at Wilbur Wright. Wilbur Wright was a vocational high school where you went 6 weeks academic class, you took all your what's required, and 6 weeks of training. I took the manufacturing. And of course, you could get a job once you got to be real good in your studies. You could get a job, but I wasn't that familiar. But I was already older. I had a part-time job. I was working after school. But as I was riding on the bus, crosstown bus, I used to stop over at this bus would stop on Forest and Orleans, and through the window I could see they had same kind of machines like we had in school. So I went to the boss and went in there and asked if they hiring. First they told me no, kept asking if I could come back again. They said, yeah, come back. You can come back, we're not hiring. And finally, I guess the boss or whoever the owner was over there got tired or said, this kid's persistent. So he says, when can you start? I told him, whenever you want me to start. So from then on, I had a job for life, I guess, with that company.
And then you were 18 and you got drafted?
No, I was 20. I was graduated from high school. I was 20. And as a matter of fact, my classmates saying to me, what are you, Casimir, what are you doing? What are you doing after graduation? See, at Wilbur Wright, we finished in July 15th, I believe, was our last day because of the going to school and going to work. So I says, no, I got greetings from Uncle Sam. So July 15th, I graduated or so. August 2nd, I was already in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, marching. I was in the Army for, I was drafted for 6 years, 2 years active duty, 2 years active reserves, and 2 years standby. And that's how my life began in the Army. Yeah, and then on my last furlough, I met my present wife, or future wife, however you want to say it. And she didn't want nothing to do with me, but here I am.
And then they ended up having 5 kids, and then 5 beautiful grandkids.
7.
Oh yeah, 7.
7 grandkids, yeah.
I was thinking of 5.
Yeah, we're married now 56 years already this past August, so here we are,
Wow.
happy as. And I'm now retired. I work for General Motors for 27 years. I'm already retired 22 years this past September. And I am hoping to be retired longer.
Well, thank you so much, Judge, for
You're
sharing
welcome.
your story. It is truly inspiring.
I could tell you more and more, but
We only have 10 minutes.
okay, sorry.